Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Etiquettes of Prayer, Lecture 4. Slide number 45. A summary of what we've done so far. So the first station which Imam Rahmatullah alayh assigns the most emphasis and importance to is that of the station of attentiveness to the Lord of the might of Lordship and the humility of servitude, the fact that Huwa al-awwal wal-akhir wal-dhahir wal-batin, the fact that it's all Him in dimension, in manifestation, it's all His attributes manifesting. Other than that, there is nothing, it's all Him, and that you are nothing and nothing independent from Him. Okay, so this is the first station. Now there were degrees to that. How do we attain to this station? It was ultimately by suppression or elimination of the ego, of the self-centeredness aspect of ourselves. How do we do that? It was via the Sharia, which includes the physical aspect of the Salaat, and the Tariqah, which entails the batini aspects of Salaat. And then one outcome, and thus indicated that it's happening, that this station is being realized, is that of subservience. And the more subservience one has, the more this station has become imprinted within us. But it was via the Sharia and the Tariqah. The Tariqah includes the inner etiquettes that we're going to be dealing with. So how do we get to this suppression of the ego? Via the Sharia and Tariqah. Inclusive in this tariqah are the etiquettes of prayer. So we do the etiquettes of prayer to lower that suppression, to lower that self-centeredness and ego, and to facilitate, therefore, ultimately that station of attentiveness. Now, there are etiquettes which facilitate the imprinting of invocations and acts of worship, such as Salaat. Okay, now Salaat is an act of worship, but it also entails invocations. In order for this to be easily imprinted within our soul, there are etiquettes that we can do. The first, which Imam speaks about, is composure of the heart or mental tranquility. Now what does this mean? It means that the heart, the soul, not to be unstable or constrained, to be at peace. But the question is, to be at peace in relation to what? And the answer is in relation to the station of attentiveness. Once you're at peace in relation to the station of attentiveness, to whatever degree, okay, maybe in the degree of ilm, knowledge, you may be at peace, but in relation to the second degree, it may be more difficult than the third degree, and so on and so forth. But the more you're at peace in relation to the station of attentiveness, then what you do invocation-wise or act of worship-wise or salat-wise will become imprinted within your heart, and it will be you. You are your actions. It will elevate you. Now, with this first etiquette, the invocation or the act must enter a modulator, let's call it attentiveness composure, because it's in relation to that composure of the heart, in relation to the station of attentiveness. And the product will be the imprinting of the invocation or the act in the heart. And an offshoot or a result will be that subservience. Now, once this imprinting starts, you will be in unity with that invocation or attribute. It becomes second nature. But until then, it's only a mere superficial utterance. Okay? It's a superficial action that you'll be doing. And this utterance or action is of hardly any effect for your hereafter. It was superficial, it was physical, and you would leave it. When you depart the physical realm of existence, that physical act that you did, that physical utterance that you did, which was batin less, which had no imprinting effect, incorporating effect on the soul, as you leave for the hereafter, you would leave all the physical aspect, and since you were void in relation to the batini aspects, you would be going without any salat in the hereafter. Okay, now, there's a synergy here. We spoke about this synergy in the last lecture, but here I want to give you the order of the sequence of things which are happening here. Look, the first step that Imam said was the station of attentiveness. And he gave 4 degrees to it. The first was academic, knowledge. So you start with the knowledge. Once you understand the knowledge and acquire that academic attentiveness, you've acquired a degree, okay, albeit degree 1, but you have acquired a degree of that attentiveness. The next step is you do salat, okay, and when you do salat, you have a composure, a mental tranquility in relation to step 1 of the academic attentiveness that you had acquired before. So you're doing salat with that background of degree number 1 in that station of attentiveness. And therefore, with that degree of composure in relation to the station of attentiveness, when you do salat, a small degree of subservience would result. And that small degree of subservience results in the ego diminishing accordingly, albeit small, because it's only degree 1 of that academic attentiveness that you had acquired. And as your ego diminishes accordingly, more attentiveness will be acquired, i.e. you are more ready now to get to stage 2 or to degree number 2 of that attentiveness, the degree of the heart. And then as you now acquire more attentiveness, when you do salat with that modulating background, then extra subservience will be acquired. With extra subservience, more ego will be diminished. As a result, more attentiveness, either in degree 2 or even more. And then you do salat again, and so on and so on. This slide number 48 is important. Please try to understand it, based on what we've said so far. We're now entering true practical steps now in spiritual wayfaring, what you've been asking for. Now look, Imam then, in this chapter, he actually, in a very covert manner, he's giving a prescription. Now I remember once, when I was in the Bay Area, someone came to me. And you see, the problem is that we're not giving the youth these advice and prescriptions and spiritual wayfaring in practical prescriptions. And what they do is they go and read upon the spirituality of other Islamic denominations or even other religions. You'll be surprised. Now, once I was in the Bay Area, one of the youth came to me and said, because you see, the youth are thirsty for this stuff. They need it. If you're a human, you need it. If you say you don't need it, or you're not after spirituality, there's something definitely intrinsically wrong, organically wrong. Here, he came to me and said, I went to a local place. There's a tariqah being practiced. And this tariqah has a sheikh. And they're from a particular, Muslim denomination, but they're practicing this tariqah. And then he said to me that the first step that the sheikh of that tariqah, the sheikh there told me, was to go in a corner of a room in your own peace and quiet and just say, La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah. Keep on saying it. And they gave a number. Okay? That's it. Now, he asked me, is that okay? Okay? And I told him that, let this be off record, but yes, it is okay. Because were I to tell him it's okay and this to be spread, then you can imagine the kind of feedback one may receive. So please with you people too, if you try not to spread this too much. Although here, the reason I've been very bold to mention this is because Imam Khomeini has given this prescription too. Here in this chapter it says, were one to recite the noble invocation of La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah, slide 49. But he adds this, look, he's a true sheikh, he's a true mentor of a tariqah, the Imam Khomeini. He says, if you recite this with the composure of the heart, meaning that attentiveness, composure, the invocation will be taught with penetration upon your heart. This is what we're after. And also, La ilaha illallah and Muhammadun Rasul, it's in the Salaat too. So look, your Salaat will be imprinted, or at least this, if you want to just recite it, not even as an invocation separate from Salaat. Either if it's a Salaat or if it's a separate invocation, it becomes, if you do it with the background, with that composure of the heart, then this invocation will be penetrated in you. And then your subservience increases. And then after that, the ego goes down, because your subservience to Allah goes up, the I-ness goes down, and then you can acquire more in the station of attentiveness. Now, once this happens, and this penetration upon the heart is resulted, from now on, the Zahiri, verbal act is merely following suit from the heart. Okay? Rather than before, when it was the verbal utterance being actualized without the guidance and backing of the heart. It was just a verbal effort. But once this penetration upon the heart happens, anything after that, verbally, here, that verbal aspect is following the heart, which has now received and incorporated this invocation. Why did it receive it? Why has it succeeded in its penetration upon the heart? Because the station of attentiveness was acquired. Okay, now once this imprinting occurs, the heart is the Qibla and the Imam. The heart is the Imam. The verbal utterance of the limb is a ma'moom, is a follower of the Imam. If you understand this, you'll understand what Iyaka na'bud means. We worship you alone. Why do you say we? This we. Why do you use the first person plural? Why don't you use the first person singular? Why don't you say I, you alone? I worship. Okay? And if you understand this slide, you'll understand it. I don't want to give away the answer too quickly. Okay, although I've spoken about it in many lectures, but if you haven't followed those lectures, you should understand from this slide alone. Okay, now, so without this imprinting, one may even forget the names of the prophets and the books in the hereafter. Because when you leave the physical realm of existence, without these imprintings and incorporations resulting, what have you taken with yourself to the hereafter to remind yourself of? Imam says, the more the imprinting, the more one's limbs are heart guided. And since the heart is Allah's throne and Allah's sanctuary, He, Allah, works through the heart. And so more and more of these limbs will be divine and of benefit in the hereafter. Otherwise, superficial limbs are of no benefit in the hereafter. And since what you did with your limbs were never incorporated in your heart, and now you go in the hereafter, you leave your superficial limbs behind, you're going to be deaf, dumb and blind. No sight, no hearing, no speaking, and so on and so forth. Slide 51. Another prescription Imam is alluding to through one or two traditions. He says, look, when you want to recite the Quran, which is God's word, do it against the background of that attentiveness, composure. Okay? And then Imam mentions 2 hadith. But before that, this is a prescription Imam is giving. When you want to recite the Quran, there are 2 ways of reciting it. Just nilly-willy. But the second route is reciting it based on that mental or composure of the heart in relation to the attentiveness of the might of Lordship. When that's the case, with the reciting the Quran or memorizing the Quran, it becomes firmly imprinted, incorporated within you. And then all those subsequent effects result. Imam speaks of 2 hadith. The second hadith he mentions is a hadith which says that repetition and persistence of actions are important. The most beloved thing before Allah is the repetition and the persistence of actions, even if they're little in quantity. These are traditions from Ahlul Bayt. Because with this persistence and repetition, assuming that attentiveness, composure, background is present, then that action that you're doing will be of benefit to you. The first hadith is a hadith where in the hereafter many of us may see a figure which is very heavenly and say, oh, how beautiful you are, who are you? And then that heavenly entity says, well, remember when you memorized this surah of the Quran? It was me. But then you forgot. And then I became mutually exclusive to you. Look, this is because memory too is a part of that incorporating. Even if you recite it with that proper background of attentiveness, composure, it becomes incorporated. Okay, but sometimes you do it through memorizing the verse of the Quran. But the problem with memorizing is if you forget, then it becomes segregated from you. Okay, so this was the first etiquette that Imam Khomeini Rahmatullah alayhi has mentioned after speaking about the first station. Okay, now we go to the second etiquette. The second etiquette is titled Protection of Acts of Worship, such as Salaat, from satanic exploitation. And he uses this verse of the Quran to say that this etiquette has been extrapolated from the Quran, but the Quran says, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَلَى صَلَوَاتِهِمْ يُحَافِظُونَ. The believers are those who, upon their salat, they protect it. They're over their salat, they are protecting their salat. Protecting from what? From misguidance. And therefore Imam uses the word satanic exploitation here. To the degree that shaitan exploits you, you're being misguided. Shaitan, Iblis, is an agent of Allah, agent of misguidance. One of Allah's names is the misguider. But the Quran says, Yudillu Allah, Yudillu ma yasha. Allah misguides those who want misguidance. So you did something wrong first. That was forgetting Allah to whatever capacity. In proportion to the capacity that you forgot Allah, you will be given and assigned misguidance from Iblis. But it wasn't the Iblis's fault. It wasn't Allah's fault. Okay? All actions go back to Allah. He's the misguider, even this action. But you did something to deserve that misguidance. It's cause and effect. And the agent here of Allah is Iblis in relation to misguidance. In relation to revelation and knowledge, it's Jibreel. In relation to giving life, it's Mikael. It's Israfil. In relation to giving sustenance, it's Mikael, and so on and so forth. Okay, introduction. Imam starts with this introduction, slide 53, that he says, look, when you're consuming food for physical growth, the type of food, the quantity of food, the stuff that it's made out of, one's bodily constitution, depending, do you have diabetes, high blood pressure, your heart condition, are you of the, different constitutions that exist, and so on and so forth, they're all evaluated before you consume the food in order to benefit physically from that food, and maximally and optimally you have to analyze all these parameters. For spiritual growth, it's the same. For spiritual elevation, similar parameters need to be evaluated in order not to disrupt a healthy spiritual constitution, in order not to, slow down your spiritual elevation. Okay, here too. So we have spiritual food, and also we have parameters different naturally to the parameters for physical food, but we need parameters too. So two things we need to ascertain: what's the spiritual food and what are the parameters. Now Imam says the spiritual food is aqa'id, ma'arif, that's doctrine, tawheed, ma'ad and nubuwwah. Okay, this is the spiritual food. Now the next slide. This doctrine must be shaitan free. Now, a number of points have to be mentioned here. First of all, to be shaitan free, you have to get the doctrine from the Holy Messenger and or his successors, and or one's intellect also. These three build your doctrine. But the intellect has to be pure intellect. Shouldn't have any biases. Shouldn't be, be misled in any way. It has to be firm. The rationality has to be based on firm deductions. It has to be acquired from the teachings of the Holy Messenger, the teachings of the successors of the Holy Messenger, the Ahlul Bayt. That's one level for your doctrine to be Satan free. And Satan, it's not the person, it's that misguidance. That person is just an agent doing his job. Note that the relationship between the doctrine and the acts of worship, right, like Tawheed and Salaat, for example, is that of seeds and harvesters. Doctrine are the seeds, the food, but this has to be harvested, cultivated. The cultivators are the acts of worship. So the purer the seeds and the finer the machinery, the better one's growth. Now, acts of worship are physical motions and movements. But these physical motions and movements, they represent a batini reality. And that batini reality ultimately is doctrine. Okay? It's doctrine. Even these etiquettes that we're mentioning, eventually you want that attentiveness, which was pure Tawheed, to be imprinted. So, a batin-less Salat is, of minimum use. To get the most out of the batin, satanic exploitation must be obstructed. Satanic exploitation in one's Salat, you have to get rid of it, so that the Salat be batini, not only sufficing with the superficial aspect. So, this Salat is a harvester to doctrine, to the spiritual food, and this Salat, its reality is that spiritual food, and to make the most of that reality, of that spiritual food, of that batin, the Salat has to be Satan free. Now, how do we do that? Imam says purity from satanic exploitation, which is the precursor to ikhlas, being sincere, doing things out of sincerity, dedicating things sincerely for Allah's sake. That's the meaning of ikhlas, where you dedicate your actions, your attributes, everything purely for the sake of Allah. Okay, we'll speak more about that later. But this purity from satanic exploitation, we haven't said what that means yet in practice. But this purity from satanic exploitation, it's a precursor to ikhlas. Okay, that's one. Then Imam says this purity from satanic exploitation, which is a precursor to ikhlas, it can't be achieved save if the traveller treads upon one's ego and self-centeredness. Okay? You can't purify yourself from satanic exploitation, which we still have to explain what that means practically, okay? We've explained it theoretically, but what does it mean in practical terms? But that purity from satanic exploitation, which is crucial to get ikhlas, it can't be achieved unless the ego is, trodden upon. Now, some side effects of satanic exploitation is, just my own examples here. Imam hasn't given these examples, he's spoken in general terms. But let's say, you say, God has a hand. Or you say, prophets can sin. These are all side effects of, Iblis managing to exploit your aqa'id, your spiritual food. Or regarding Quranic descriptions of heaven and hell, you say, these are symbolic, it's only a figure of speech. Or when you're worshipping, you worship to get a long life or to have more heavenly palaces or huris. This is a degree of satanic exploitation has occurred. You haven't sinned according to the Sharia, but you've sinned according to the Tariqah. Look, this is a book of the Tariqah now. You people, you want to get to know more about the Tariqah. Practice more about the Tariqah. Now look, we've said before that to suppress the ego, you have to abide by the Sharia and the Tariqah. Slide 56. To suppress or eliminate satanic exploitation, which is part of the Tariqah, 3 things Imam says you have to do. Scrutinize one's actions and incentives. I'll explain what that means in future slides. Right now. Scrutinize one's goals and objectives. And scrutinize one's doctrine and beliefs, especially in relation to Tawheed. And when you're doing these 3, Imam says, be careful. Never give yourself the benefit of the doubt. Be suspicious of yourself. Being suspicious of other people is haram, Not children, but, because we want to educate your children, sometimes you have to be a bit suspicious. You have to work just to make sure. But other people, being suspicious is a sin. But in the Tariqah, being suspicious of yourself is crucial. When is it crucial? In relation to these 3 scrutinies that you want to do in relation to yourself. Scrutiny of your actions and incentives. Scrutiny of your goals and objectives. Scrutiny of your doctrine and your beliefs, how much you've acquired, especially in relation to Tawheed. Don't give yourself the benefit of the doubt. These are practical steps now we're entering. Okay. Scrutinizing your actions and incentives. What does that mean? What was your incentives in doing a particular action? Was it to just abide by the Sharia alone, forgetting the Tariqah? Was it to gain Allah's satisfaction when you did X action, when you wrote a book? If that's the case, if someone stole your book and published it in their name, why did you become disappointed? Was getting that job, for example, for Allah's satisfaction? If so, if you lost it or you didn't get it in the first place, why were you disappointed? You did it for Allah's satisfaction. Allah knows better. It wasn't on a par with Allah's will. You did your best, okay, but was it to gain Allah's satisfaction? If it wasn't, satanic exploitation. You've been satanically exploited. If it was only to abide by the Sharia alone, neglecting the Tariqah, your incentive in that action has been exploited by Iblis. If, for example, Salaat, did you do Salaat only to go to heaven or to escape hell or to gain relief from an illness? Okay, you've been exploited satanically. You see, that purity from satanic exploitation is yet to be acquired. Or when you were doing it, did you acknowledge Allah is watching over you? If not, you've been satanically exploited to some degree. When you were doing that action, were you saying to say, am I improving in the tuning of my intentions over time with this particular action? Have I been improving or not? If not, you've been satanically exploited. Or am I improving action-wise in in that when alone and when in public, this salat of mine, this fasting of mine, this eating of mine, this thinking of mine, whatever, is it uniform? The batin and the zahir being the same? Or no, when I'm in private, I pray, fast, eat in one manner, but when I'm in public, it's in another manner. You're being satanically exploited if there's a discrepancy here. This is how you should scrutinize your incentives when you're doing particular actions or invocations or whatever. Now, don't overboard yourself from tonight. If you overboard yourself, either you'll die physically because you won't be able to take it. We've had people, a sign of a weak sheikh, to the students, is when the students die early. They become satiated spiritually too early, and the soul becomes independent from the body, therefore, and then that's the definition of death. They die. Here, you shouldn't overboard yourself. Now, I haven't gone into particular intricacies, for example, here, but I've given you examples. I haven't gone inside the example and given you detailed examples because I'm not of that capacity. But many mentors do this, and it's good, but we have to find someone. But this much that I've given you is very useful, inshallah. And don't give yourself the benefit of the doubt, and don't think that you have to change in a week or a month, but you have to make sure you're improving over time. That's all that is important for now. And you do that by accounting, muhasabah. You have to account. In the beginning, you may have to keep on writing things, making notes. But over time, it becomes second nature. It's easy to manage mentally. But answer these questions, and you'll be failing most of them, if not all. But the degree to which you're failing, that can be lessened, at least, to start off with. Okay. So when I say, when the third point, for example, was it to go to heaven, to escape hell, or to gain relief? See, so here you're praying, but you're using Allah as a means to going to heaven. There's a form of satanic exploitation here. The intentions have been exploited, have been abused. Okay, you're using Allah as a means to heaven. Otherwise, but the best way is you want to do salat or give charity for Allah's sake, period. Irrespective of whether you'll be given the heaven or not. Irrespective of whether you become relief from an illness or not, or whatever. Okay? That's when you do something for Allah's sake, period, for Allah's sake, and nothing else, that's pure ikhlas now. Shaitan has no root here. And this is, for example, imagine you're in hell, and then one of the angels of heaven come to you and say, "Look, you're in hell now. If you sell this action of yours that you did, a good action that you did, will bring you and take you into heaven. If you did that action for Allah's sake alone, you would answer that angel, 'No, I won't.' Because you did that for Allah's sake. You're not even ready to go to heaven for Allah's sake, though. Because that action you did only purely to get Allah's satisfaction. Nothing will compromise it." One can speak a lot here, but I don't want to cause any despair. Okay, scrutinizing one's goals and objectives. Okay, ask yourself, was it my end goal in doing such and such an action? Or was Allah the end goal? What is my end goal? Is it that action? Is it the heaven that I get from that action? Or was Allah the end goal? If Allah was the end goal, good. Anything else, you've exploited yourself by means of the shaitan. Or, for example, your objective. Was it the same as 5 years ago? Or is it holier now? Is it purer now? Some people have one objective, it's the same after 70 years, it's the same objective. I want to go to heaven. That's it. Or I want to have houris, palaces, this, that. How ready am I to sacrifice it for a higher spiritual goal? That's very important. You have an objective in life. Let's say it's a physical objective, a materialistic, financial objective. How ready are you to sacrifice it to get to a higher spiritual goal? Or even if you have a spiritual goal, but to get a higher spiritual goal. If you say you're very ready, it's a very good sign. You're getting closer and closer to that, being freer from Iblis and closer to Allah. How dependent am I on this job or this subject at university? Some people doing medicine, engineering, graphic design, architecture, whatever. That's the goal. If you were to say to them, in order to become more spiritual, how ready are you to give away this job and get another job, but another job which is much easier, there's less money in it, but your spirituality will increase. How dependent are you on this job? The more dependency, the worse it is. What drove me towards a particular job or action or subject? How much was it for Allah's sake, period? Or was it for other reasons? Your peers wanted it. The community wanted it. Prestige demanded it from you, and so on and so forth. How ready am I to disassociate from it? You're doing medicine, you're doing pharmacy, you're doing architecture, you're earning good money, but because now you're elevating, you say no. How ready you say, look, I don't want my spirituality to be compromised. I'm not going to be dictated and, like a robot, what to do 9 to 5. I'm going to put all this away and go and focus on my spirituality. How ready are you to do that? No one is saying you to forget all your jobs and then with no money, carry on with your life. No, that's not allowed according to the Sharia. But let's say there are other options and you don't have to get a bigger house, a bigger car, bigger prestige. And you can suffice, but you suffice with a lower worldly life, but a much higher spiritual life. How ready am I to disassociate it from it? Sometimes people think of insurances for 20, 30, 40 years, for what will happen to their children in 20, 30, 40 years time and everything. All those have priorities, and they amass and they make more and more schemes and protocols. But what happens to spirituality? If you're of that type, these lectures won't be of any benefit to you. It won't interest you. Maybe, I don't know what to say really. Yes. Anyway, so what role does the community perception play in my decisions? Look, if there were no one who knew me, would I have chosen the same? Look, let's say you were on an island. Okay, no one knew you on that island. Everyone had a job. Would you have chosen the same job? Look, these are important things to assess how much your objectives, your goals are being exploited satanically. Finally, the third form of scrutiny was in relation to one's doctrine and beliefs. Slide 59. Especially in relation to Tawheed. How much Tawheed do I know? Or am I still saying that God has a hand? God has a physical aspect to him. A hand of some sort. Or even an immaterial hand. How much am I limiting Allah? Or as the prophets sin. Allah's prophets sin, and that doesn't go against Allah's attributes of perfection. How can someone say that? How much Tawheed do I know? This has to be, analysed. How much of that is due to my own doing? Okay, this degree of Tawheed that you know, how much is it your fault? And how much is it the fault of others? Like the Sunday schools you went to. How much Tawheed did you ever learn outside Sunday school? Why were you ready to learn every other form of knowledge, but in relation to Tawheed, you sufficed with your Sunday school teachings of 20, 30 years ago? When was the last time I read on Tawheed? Compared to novels and magazines and surfing the net and so on and so forth. When was the last time I actually read something properly on Tawheed to increase my knowledge? Compare your present and past knowledge of Tawheed. How big is the difference? The lesser the difference, the worse the condition you're in, the more you're being exploited. How much taqleed has infiltrated your doctrinal thinking system? In doctrine, taqleed is not allowed. But how much of your doctrinal thinking is because X person said something without you understanding it rationally? But you said X person said it, I believe it's part of my doctrine. That's of no use to you. You can say X person said it, but you have to understand it too. You have to make an effort. There's no taqleed in doctrine. Even when we say you have to follow a mujtahid in doctrine, I don't mean follow it in the same way you follow a mujtahid in fiqh. Here, I mean you follow them, listen to them, see what it is, and do your best to understand it. Because if you don't understand it, just saying X says that, with doctrine itself builds you. That's why taqleed in doctrine is not allowed. But in action it's okay, because knowledge of the actions in fiqh don't build you. It's the doing of those actions, incorporating those actions, which will build you. So taqleed is unproblematic in fiqh. Okay, now, some of the side effects Imam mentions in slide 60, seen in the so-called urafa and the ulama and the ascetics, is that there's a predomination of animalistic traits. You see their animalistic traits. They're urafa. But since they've been exploited satanically, the incentives were wrong. The goals were wrong. They never scrutinized themselves. They were urafa, but the tawheed was minimal. As a result, one of the side effects is that the animalistic traits, as this satanic exploitation increases, animalistic traits increase. The ego hasn't been suppressed as it should have been. Or you become suspicious of Allah's servants, of people. You're suspicious in relation to everyone. Oh, who's he? His features are like this, he's like that. And you become suspicious. And you start judging. Like bad ethical dispositions, you do more and more of them. Yeah? You're a so-called arif. You're a so-called ascetic, zahid. You're a so-called alim. But it's all so-called. It wasn't done in the proper way. You didn't scrutinize yourself. You didn't protect your actions from satanic exploitation. You commit more and more unethical actions. You judge people. You hold on to grudges. You don't forgive people. You become more and more self-conceited if you don't scrutinize your actions from satanic exploitation. Because now you're feeling that, you're doing all these actions. How good you are. Self-conceited. You become self-centered, arrogant, and so on and so forth. So, what's to be done? Okay, this is the plan. A summary of this etiquette. Imam says, so, whatever the domain and divine tariqah be, the traveller on the path of the hereafter must, firstly, like a compassionate doctor or sympathetic nurse, with utmost precision and gravity, take care of one's own status and thoroughly investigate one's faults in one's spiritual wayfaring. Okay, that was in relation to the 3 forms of scrutiny which we discussed. And secondly, Imam says, not to be heedless in relation to seeking refuge in Allah's divine grace. How? By means of assemblies of solitude and lamentation and remorse, regret, crying before one's Lord. This is a spiritual prescription here. That you, in your own quiet, when there's no one there, at the heart of the night, in the middle of the night, in a corner of the house or wherever, you lament. And the more attentiveness you have before Allah, you see yourself as nothing, and in your own quiet you lament with remorse, with regret, crying before one's Lord, saying that, oh Allah, only you can help me. I'm a destitute, wretched creature and no one. You help me. It's all you. And seek refuge in His grace. And then Imam ends with this paragraph. It's his own wording. I've semi-translated it. It's in slide 62. It says, "O Allah, you yourself are aware of my poor state and my destitution. You know that without the hand of your holy essence, there is no escape for me from the forces that even had agreed to approach your prophets and disciples, the satanic forces. Without your grace and mercy, we are bound to annihilation. Free us from doubts and shirk. You are the guardian of guidance." Really, with an attentive heart, with true remorse, have these sessions at the beginning, once a day, for 5 minutes, for 2 minutes a day. Go in a corner, have such an assembly with Allah in your own quiet. Okay? And then after a month, increase it to 5 minutes. Don't burn your motor, but increase these assemblies of solitude. Okay? You and Allah alone. Seek His refuge in His divine grace. So with these two, this is the second etiquette. Now I couldn't go into more practical details than this. Anything else would have been irresponsible on my behalf. So please make the most out of it. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala tahirin. Okay, there are just a couple of questions here. Let me just look at my mobile. I've listed them all here. Continuing on the signs of the ego, is it always a vice to feel displeased or upset? For example, if one were to be upset at one's spouse for a non-shari matter, is this always a sign of the ego? Okay, here, now this depends on the reason why you became disappointed. For example, if your spouse did the same action, but you and the spouse, if you were on an island and the spouse was to commit that same non-shari action, would you still have been displeased to the same degree? Or are you displeased for something else? Okay? Because Allah is all forgiving. And that person, if they repent, they may become a better person than you. But why did you become displeased? If it was only for Allah's sake, it was very good. But don't bother the person. Express your displeasure in a good way without bothering that spouse. But let's say, and you can evaluate yourself, how do you know whether you're displeased for Allah's sake, period, or for other? Be honest to yourself first, and secondly, go through this scenario. You're on an island and your spouse commits a non-shari matter. Okay? And no one that you know will get to know about it. And even if there are people who get to know, it'll have no bearing. You'll never be embarrassed by anyone. Okay? In front of anyone. Would you still have been displeased? If the answer is yes to the same degree, it's okay. It doesn't mean there's no ego here. It's only for Allah's sake here. This displeasure of yours is coming from Allah. It's Allah's displeasure. So it's not an ego thing. So being upset per se isn't bad. Okay, but sometimes it is bad and it aggravates the ego. But sometimes it doesn't. So the criterion is why. Why did you become displeased? Be honest to yourself and the answer will come. In other words, the questioner continues, how much freedom are we allowed to give our emotions when dealing with other people without compromising true attentiveness to Allah? No, these two things, attentiveness to Allah and how much freedom we're allowed to give to our emotions to when dealing with other people, these are two mutually exclusive things. Okay? But in relation to how much of our emotions we have to express, like sorrow, fear, happiness, displeasure, that depends on the reason behind it. Was it egocentric or not? And that scenario I gave helps you to evaluate yourself. Okay. In slide 35, you state that we're predestined to attain to perfection, but this perfection may be in virtue, where you encounter Allah's attributes of beauty, or in vice, where you encounter His attributes of majesty. Can you please explain this further, particularly the vice portion of it? I'm trying to understand how to see God through vices as well. Look, all actions, whatever is, comes from Allah. It's all Him. Okay? Now, however, these actions, Allah misguides, but those who want misguidance. Look, so someone did something wrong, and therefore they're misguided, but that's all because they were forgetting Allah to X degree. To the degree they were forgetting Allah, they received misguidance from Allah. So someone who's stealing, they're misguided. To say that this action of stealing, does it emanate from Allah? We say yes. Do you attribute the stealing to Allah though? We say no. That's impolite. That's wrong to do that. For example, I put a ladder against the wall for someone to go up. And then above the wall, there's a pot of sweets and a pot of poison. But I gave the ladder for that person to go up. And the person took from the poison. This action of taking from the poison emanates from my doing, because I gave the ladder. Okay? But to attribute the act of taking the poison to me, that would be far from, just. That's very impolite to do. Because I gave you the ladder to take from the good food. You did something wrong and you'll be misguided accordingly. So, many things that we see, okay, in the world when people are killing, or in different battlefields and everything, the unjust killing, these are all manifestations of Allah's attribute of model, which means the misguider. Okay. We would like to learn all the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so that we can recall them often and in context. Yes, that was one of the things that I had suggested too. Do you have any suggested resources for this, or good translations of Allah's names that we can refer to? Right. Look, there are many urafa who have talked about this. Like Ibn Arabi, Haji Sabzawar, and all these people. They've even written books on Allah's attributes and everything. But you don't have access to them, and studying them without a mentor would be very tricky. Now, I remember, before going to Iran, in Manchester, there was a central library there. For those who are in Manchester, it was called John Rylands Library, not the one in Deansgate, but the one on the university campus on that Oxford Road. There's a library there, and I came across a book there. This was a very long time ago. It was called Irshad. I think it was called Irshad. And it was by a Turkish Sufi, and this Sufi order is very dominant in Turkey. I can't remember the name of the actual Sufi master there, the Sheikh, but I do recall it was. But the word Irshad is in the title of this book. That book would be a good book if you can access to it. The beginning of that book, it goes through the translation and explanations of the 100 names. I remember that was a good book, if you have access to it. Another one is by a book which goes through the 100 names by someone called, I think, Yasin al-Jaburi. I came across this in Qom the first time in Ansarian publications. And they still may sell it. That book also is very good. It goes through the meanings. Now, some books may be deeper than others. This Irshad may be a bit deeper. But that book also, the Attributes of Allah, I think it was called. I'm not sure. This was a very long time ago. But that also was a good book. These are more than sufficient, I think. But if I were to give you books by the Urafa, such as Ibn Arabi or Hadi Sabzawari, this, I don't think you have access to those books anyway, but it may be a bit tricky to do alone. Okay, if we are Next question, Salam. If we are all manifestations of Allah's attributes, how do you explain all the evil and corrupt? Is that absence of His divinity? Now look, evil is another discussion altogether. But look, in brief, evil is a mental construct. It doesn't exist in reality. It's something which your mind constructs. See, you say, my house, my son, my certificate, my, all these things. You say, it's mine. These are all signs of the ego. It's all signs of you being drowned in the worldly life. We call it this in Irfan, i'tibarat, mental constructs. I'tibarat. Now these mental constructs, they build your inner dunya. Because you say, my house, you attribute the house to you, the family to you, your wife, spouse, everything, children to you, the certificate, your prestige, your title to you. See, all these are mental constructs. They don't exist. They're not in reality. They're not yours. It's all His, Allah's. You assign this, you gave a mental construct, and you call this a house, my property, ownership, marriage. These are mental constructs. You mentally constructed it. Otherwise, in the real world, there's nothing such as ownership. There's a house, there's a person, but ownership is a mental construct. Marriage is a mental construct. Titles, positions, these are mental constructs. And then we really think they're yours, they're ours, and then when we lose them, we think we've truly lost something and we become disappointed. And then we construct this idea of evil and bad. Okay? Now, these mental constructs, they're not just, we don't do it nilly-willy. We construct these things mentally. We construct mentally ownership, for example, mentally. We construct marriage mentally. We construct, jobs and positions and titles mentally so that we can acquire more and more perfection in a safe environment. But when that quest to true perfection is lost, and the goal becomes the ownership and the marriage and the title and the position, then we've lost the plot then. And that's why we become disappointed, and then we say, we become disappointed and we say that person is bad or something because they've stolen our house. Yes, that person is bad because they've stolen your house. But the stealing of your house per se isn't evil. Evil can't exist. Whatever is good. Evil is a mental construct so that you acquire more and more perfection. It's a mental construct. It helps you, constructing evil helps you to gain that perfection. But in the real world, it doesn't exist. Any act that is good. Absence of good or absence of divinity is not a perfect form of Tawheed. Because absence is non-existent. Whatever is, everything is, and it's all divinity, and it's all good. This evil that we mention, and religion mentioned, it's a mental construct, and it has benefit. But the benefit is in relation to you acquiring perfection. Whatever bars you, slows you down in your route to perfection, the Sharia constructs this term of evil. That's it. Okay. Not that it's something, in the real world it exists. It's a mental construct. Okay. I think we'll stop there. There were no other questions. وصلى الله على محمد وعلى الطاهرين.